Okay, this next video will deal with the English timeline, so you can kind of see the years, who done it, and some general information of the English Bibles up to the King James, and it's also going to deal with the why the changes, why these new versions were coming out fairly close to each other during this time, before the King James. And I just want to kind of make some comments about that as you watch the slide and see the information presented. But when you see the information that I'm getting for that, okay, is my very first video, I held this up. This is a facsimile reproduction by Hendrickson Publishers that I purchased, and in the very beginning of it, it has a history of the English Bible, and it has a lot of detail about people and some of the things going around it. And if you have this, or if you get this, I strongly encourage you to read that first section. I mean, I've had the thing a few months and have just now read that first part, dealing with the translations and so forth. But one of the things that you see in this is, all right, it was the Roman Catholic Church up until King Henry VIII, and he had a wife, and he didn't have any. It's like every child was a girl. He wasn't getting an heir. Well, King Henry wasn't the best stable-minded fella. And in those days, now we understand that the male is the one that passes either the X chromosome or the Y chromosome, which will determine whether it's male or female. But in those days, they thought that it was the women. So he wanted to get another wife, somebody who would allow him maybe to have a son. But of course, the Roman Catholic Church wouldn't allow divorce, and they wouldn't make an exception for him or anything. So he just said, okay, fine, get out of England, I'm going to start my own church. And thus began the Church of England, which today is also known as the Anglican Church. And so he, started that. And then, of course, it wasn't too long before the Protestant Reformation with Martin Luther and all that began. So you were either Anglican, part of the Church of England, or you were Catholic, or you were Protestant, if after the Reformation. Well, in England you had this tension between the Church of England and the Protestants. And depending on who was king or queen, would determine whether Catholicism was allowed to be with the Church of England, or whether Protestants were allowed to be with the Church of England. And so these translations would come out. You got these people who wanted to put the Bible into the hands of the common people, so that they could understand, and they could read God's Word, and they could, understand who He is. And so they worked on doing that, and there was various people who did it, and there was various resources they had, at their hands to do that. And there was always this revision. They would have it, and somebody would say, "Well, I think I can do better. I think I can do better." Because you got to understand. I mean, one of the overarching issues that I find in this whole subject is oversimplification. And what I mean is, there's this tendency to think that things are just extremely simple, when in fact they're more complex than we let on to be. Like, for example, well, I'll get to it because it's in the next presentation. But dealing with this history of English, so you got this tension. You got somebody who will come up with an English Bible. Well, you're in England, and if you want to get your book out, you better get permission from the king, and so forth. So there were some that came out and was distributed that was not sanctioned, was not allowed, and therefore they were illegal. You could be fined, you could be imprisoned, if you were caught doing it. So there was a process. You have these people who are Protestants coming out with this English translation. Well, here's the Church of England. They'll be like, well, we can't have this. So they go to the king, and they'll be like, we need to have our own Bible, in English. And so he'd say, yes, do that. And so they get together and they have their translation come out, and it would have the stamp of approval from the king. This is authorized by the King of England. And so you had this back and forth for a little while, and until the King James. So you'll deal with that. Now, just a couple of little quick points that I want to put on there, which the information will be in the slide, and that is that before the King James, people generally either had the Geneva or they had the Bishop's Bible. Now, the local churches, which would have been Anglican churches, were required by law to have a large Bible. They actually were fined if they did not get a large Bible. Well, they have this Bible. Well, it ain't like they had a lot of money to be able to just buy a new one. So they would wait for it to wear out before they would, order the next one. Well, before the King James came out, they had the Bishop's Bible. That was the last one that was, given by, officially, from the king and from his publishers, printers. And so they would wait for it to wear out, and then they would send in their order for a new one when they were ready for one. And they would always either ask for, the largest Bible available, or sometimes they would ask for, the newest translation available. And then, so they would do that. Well, Protestants at the time, people who were not Church of England, actually used the Geneva because it was translated and it was produced by Protestants. It was not translated and produced by the Church of England. So there were some slight differences, like the Protestants would translate congregation, whereas the Church of England wanted it translated church. The Protestants wanted it translated minister. The Church of England wanted it translated priest. And so you have these different, it's just how you're going to translate a specific word in the Greek or Hebrew or Latin or whatever you're pulling from. And, do you want to translate this as priest, or do you want to translate it as minister? Well, for Protestants, obviously, because they were not Catholic, they wanted it translated minister. But what's funny, anyway, so a lot of people would have that, and a lot of churches would have their Geneva Bible up until it wore out and they had to get a new one. Well, the Geneva Bible was actually printed, and there was more of them around for about the first 60 years of the King James, and the King James started surpassing it because in which I'll present this to you later, some specific things from this to share with you. But there was a point in time where the king actually put a stop to printing the Geneva Bible. Again, it goes back to that wanting uniformity, wanting all to have the same Bible, the same translation. And so they were actually couldn't print the Geneva anymore. Now it went underground. There were some people who were printing it either out of country or secretly. But eventually it faded off. The pressure was too great, and so the King James was, because it was the one that was officially sanctioned, it was the one that was allowed. And over time, when other people's Bibles wore out and they had to go get a new Bible, that's what was available, was the King James. So anyway, just a tidbit throw in there. I don't want to go too long here. I'm going to deal with the Textus Receptus in this video, and Erasmus. Anyway, so there's some facts with that. There's more I want to say about it. I don't have time. Actually, I think I'm going to make a second video, because I need to address some issues in that. Otherwise, you're just getting dry facts and you're not getting my interaction with those facts. So let me do that. The next one, I'm going to talk about Textus Receptus and Erasmus.